Hello, my name's Lesley Atherton, and this is my story called Lost Dog. He lay on the stones, knowing nothing of Greyfriars Bobby and all the other canines that had devotedly remained at the side of fallen friends of all species. He would not attempt to prostrate himself in an act of devotion he could not sustain. He only knew that under the pile of earth was a friend who still needed him and who he could not leave. He began to dig at the black, brown, loosened crumbs, attempting to reach his friend underneath, but as he dug deeper, the earth fell onto him, and he became frightened. He must be content to lie in hope. He whimpered when the rain began to fall, as the cemetery offered little shelter. He whimpered from loneliness, and cried in sorrow at the loss of his friend. When rain transformed to hail, he moved away from the mound of earth and found a tree. Winter had destroyed its leaves, but still the trunk provided some warmth and protection from the wind and those icy pellets which cascaded into his velvety nose with great ferocity. He heard a shouting in the distance, but thought nothing of it. Though the hail was loud, the voice was one he recognized. He knew it well, but was afraid to answer, especially as his vigil was still required. But it seemed he would not be allowed to continue such a vigil without disturbance, as the voice grew louder and closer, and as it did so he sensed the beginnings of scents on the wind, and for a moment he forgot why he was there. He knew the smell. He knew two of the three very well, especially one he'd thought he'd never smell again. He got up and shook himself dry, his wiry grey hair stiffening and sticking out, trapping heat, thank goodness, as he slowly paced towards the cemetery's gates and towards the voice that continued louder and louder. "Spartan!" it shouted. His name. "Spartan, are you there, boy?" Oh yes, he was there. Spartan was the best of dogs, and had been practising keeping company with his oldest and most beloved friend, Bodie. He made a small whimper as, turning the corner where the wrought iron gate stood, he saw Dominic. And who was that by his side, walking as if undamaged towards the pet cemetery? It was Bodie, his playmate of 10 years, limping a little, old and ill and still hurting, but definitely still alive. He had made it back from the vets. They hadn't taken him this time, as Spartan was sure they would. He and Bodie had more time. Dominic and Bodie ran to him, and another four-paws bounded towards him too. "Where have you been?" Dominic shouted as he ruffled Spartan's ears in between the yelps and wagged tails of the third and excited creatures. "Where the hell have you been?" Dominic said more softly, with tears falling onto his cheeks. Even if Spartan could have expressed himself with words as Dominic did, he knew he could never explain that all of this, the run from the vet, the mud-stained vigil, the loss of weight, all these were just little practice runs. Perhaps they'd gone too far, but it was for good reason. Spartan knew that Bodie was dying. All dogs sense death and illness and pain, and Spartan knew that Bodie's death would kill him too, if he gave it a chance, in a loss that would lead to unfathomable grief and loneliness. He had to make sure he could grieve Bodie and could support Dominic when the time came. This practice session had proved he could, and he now also knew that when it was his own turn to join Bodie in death, Dominic would be all right, because by Dominic's side was a third dog, large and big-footed, but young and full of life, who would continue Dominic's canine procession till it was time for Dominic's soul to leave the earth, and for him to join them wherever they would be. Spartan sniffed the new dog, and it began nibbling his ear playfully. A puppy, whatever next? Spartan remembered what Dominic had told him about Bodie going to another place soon, and he remembered something else, something that Dominic had read by a person called Robert Louis Stevenson. That man was a wise one, and Spartan knew his words to be the truth. You think dogs will not be in heaven? I tell you, they will be there long before any of us.